Welcome to another exciting session of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. My name is Joe Grabowski, and for those who don't know, we're all about bringing science, conservation, and adventure into classrooms throughout North America and beyond. So we have 5 classrooms joining us from different locations in North America, and I'm very excited to introduce to you Andrea Marshall. Andrea is a National Geographic Explorer. She's also the first person in the world to have completed a PhD on Manta Rays. So after she completed her thesis, she stayed on in Mozambique and founded the Marine Megafauna Foundation. And today it's now a world-leading research program, not just in mantas, but many other marine species in the area. So looking at things like biology, reproductive behavior, use of habitat, migration, social behavior. And she's increased epically the amount that we know about manta rays, even discovering new species. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us.
You are welcome. I'm excited. Hi, guys.
All right. Well, Andrea, I know you have an awesome presentation to share with the students today, and then after that, we'll take some questions. So I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to share with you my screen so you guys can see the presentation I've prepared for you guys today. I will be talking to you. First, I just want to make sure everyone can see everything. Okay, is everyone getting that feed?
Thumbs up if you see it. Looks good.
Okay, great. I would like to talk to you guys today a little bit about our work. So as Joe said, I run the Marine Megafauna Foundation. So I'm personally based most of the year here in Africa, which is where I am right now. And the sun's just setting. I don't know what time it is for you guys in the United States, but it's almost evening for us here. I started this foundation probably almost 15 years ago, and for those of you guys who don't know what marine megafauna are, it's kind of a funny word, megafauna. Megafauna are sort of large, charismatic animals, very iconic animals. So on land, they could be things like elephants or rhinos or grizzly bears. In the ocean, a lot of these animals are things like whale sharks, which are the biggest fish in the ocean, or things like whales, which are some of the biggest animals on the planet. In fact, the blue whale is the largest animal that's ever lived, and things like manta rays. So these are the things that we focus on, and we focus on them not only because they're iconic and beautiful, but because many of them are in trouble. Many of them are threatened species, and many of them, because of the state of the oceans these days, really need our help. So we decided to focus our efforts on these threatened species, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more today specifically about the work that I do. As Joe said before, we have projects all over the world. So while we're a U.S. nonprofit, we actually have researchers based all over in the field. So my hope today is to be able to give you a little bit of information about the square all the way over on the left-hand side, which is our research programs in Eastern Africa. So specifically our work in Mozambique, which is, like I said, where I am at the moment. So I want to give you an idea of what it's like to be a field researcher, what it's like to learn about these animals, make discoveries, and then try and figure out how to save the animals. So we'll specifically talk about our Global Manta Ray Research Program today. And this is the program that I run. Manta rays are my favorite animal, as you can see. We've been running this program for about 15 years now. So we've been doing a lot of really exciting research, as Joe's detailed before. But I want to start at the beginning. I kind of want to tell you guys what manta rays are to begin with. Many people don't really know what a manta ray is, and it really starts with what a ray is. So many people are familiar with sharks. A lot of people don't really understand what rays are. Rays are really flattened sharks. So rays and sharks are almost like cousins. They're very similar animals. They have very similar biologies. They live in similar places. They have similar habits. One is cylindrical, and that's the shark, and one is more flattened, and those are the rays. So up on the screen now you can see a variety of different types of ray species that we have in our oceans. People are kind of really surprised to learn that there are more species of rays in the oceans than there are sharks. This is a highly diverse group. Rays are actually more in trouble than sharks too. More species of rays are listed as threatened species nowadays than sharks are. So these guys are in a lot of trouble. I love them because they come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. They are an incredibly diverse group, and they've evolved in so many different ways. Just looking on the screen now, you can see ones that have saws on the front of their face. You can see ones flying literally through the water column, almost like birds. You see other ones that are sort of kind of like chunky little balls of fat that kind of like swim around at the bottom of reefs. They all look so varied and different colors, different patterns. It's a very, very diverse group. Now, as the rays started to evolve, they kind of went from more of a ground-dwelling animal, you know, one that kind of hugs the bottom and lives associated with the bottom, to ones that live up in the water column a bit. Now, the largest group of rays that there are called the stingrays. And of course, many of you guys know about stingrays because of their negative encounters with humans sometimes. You know, accidentally people step on them and sometimes they get stung accidentally. This is a very common type of stingray. You can see stingrays are very round shape. They kind of have a very disc shape and they kind of undulate around on the reefs. I'm sure all of you guys have seen these guys on the Discovery Channel or National Geographic at some stage. This is the largest group of rays, and out of these rays came, you know, the ancestors of manta rays. So these guys eventually started moving up into the water column, and as they moved up into the water column, they started to change their shape. So this is also a stingray. This is called the small eye stingray. It's really the largest marine stingray in the world. You can actually see how big it is in comparison with that diver. You know, even though it kind of still looks like a traditional stingray, you can see that it now lives almost in the water column. It now flies around or swims around almost like a bird. And as you can imagine, this kind of swiftly turned into things like the mobulid rays, which are the closest living relative to mantas, and then of course the manta rays. So the manta rays are an animal that swims constantly throughout its life. This animal never stops swimming as long as it lives, and I think we estimate at the moment they live probably sort of 40 to 50 years, so very, very long-lived animals. And these are, of course, the kings of the ray group. So these guys are the largest living rays on the planet. They can get up to sort of 8 meters or about 24, 25 feet wingspans. So that's measured from one tip of the wing all the way to the other. That's kind of hard for people to imagine. I'm not sure if you can imagine how large 24 or 25 feet is. So I actually am showing a picture of maybe about a, maybe about a 20 to 21 foot individual here. And you can see me swimming next to it. I'm actually taking a little sample from its skin. So you can see how monstrous these animals get. But despite their size, they're incredibly gentle animals, so there's nothing to fear. They're no longer stingrays, so they actually don't have a stinger, and they can't hurt you. So despite their enormous size, I mean, they almost feel like a spaceship when they swim over you. They definitely can't hurt you at all. They're incredibly friendly animals. As I said before, they spend their whole time swimming around in the open ocean, and they only come into reefs occasionally, and that's when we have encounters with them. Now, manta rays are, as I said, they are like sharks, because all sharks and rays have a similar sort of diagnostic feature in that they have cartilage instead of bone. So our internal skeleton is made up of bone, whereas sharks and rays' internal skeleton is made up of cartilage, which is the same stuff as in the tip of your nose or in your ear. So we're looking down on a manta ray right now, and if you were to look at a manta ray from the inside out, this is what its skeleton looks like inside, but that entire skeleton there you could cut with literally a butter knife. So it is very soft and pliable, and that's one of the reasons that mantas and other sharks and rays are so flexible and so maneuverable. It's one of their finer characteristics. As I said before, manta rays are not dangerous, so this is also looking down on the face of a manta, and you can see its jaws there. You know, unlike some of the predatory sharks that you see on Shark Week that maybe you're afraid of, maybe you're not, you shouldn't be, but you know, you might be because some of them have big teeth. Manta rays don't have big teeth. They only have teeth on their lower jaw. It's in what we call a tooth band that stretches from one side of the jaw to the other. And if you were to blow up that tooth band with really high level photography, which we're fortunate enough to be able to do, you'll actually see tiny little embedded teeth. Manta rays can have up to 3,000–4,000 teeth. And they look like a little tooth. You can see up in the right-hand corner, you know, they actually look like a little tooth, but they're super small, and they can't hurt you, and they don't even use them for feeding. There's nothing to fear about manta rays at all. So there are two different species of mantas. I think Joe just mentioned that we actually described a second species of manta, this one, a few years ago, and we described it as the giant manta. And that was a pretty amazing discovery to find an animal that's so large that no one really knew about in the oceans. Of course, there's the original species of manta that we had known for a long time too, called the Reef Manta. So these two are the two recognized species of mantas now in the world. As I said, one's called the Reef Manta because it tends to live in more closely associated with inshore areas and shallow water reefs. And then the giant manta ray is the one we're now studying intensively, and this is like an oceanic wanderer, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Amazingly, I'm actually trying to describe a third species of manta now, so I actually believe there's probably three, and hopefully next year we'll be able to describe this animal, which I will name Manta giorna, or maybe the Caribbean or the Atlantic manta when I describe it. The reason I'm mentioning it to you guys today is only because this manta is from the Americas. So this is the manta that you guys have in the United States, or the coastal United States anyway. So it's almost going to be like your kind of manta over there in the US. We don't have them in the Indian Ocean or the Pacific. So to tell you a little bit more about mantas, especially in terms of their senses and their body parts, again, this is kind of a manta side on. You can see how beautiful they are, but you can also see how weird they kind of look. You know, they don't look like a normal ray, and that's because they have several very prominent features. One of them actually being those projections on the front of their face. So you can see their eye, and then you can see these long, almost things that look like horns. That's actually how they got their name. Manta rays were originally called devilfish, or devil rays. And that's because people thought those were real horns and that they could do damage to people, that they could spear through a boat, or they could hurt people underwater. Of course they cannot. Those are just like extra fins, and they actually roll them up when they're swimming. And then when they're feeding, unravel them, and they use them almost as paddles to push food into their mouth. So again, not dangerous at all, but that's what those are. You also can see a lot of big fish hanging off this manta, and I just want to let you know what that is now in case it's distracting you from some of the other photos that I'm showing throughout the presentation. What's sticking onto this manta are called remoras. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of remoras or shark suckers before. These are kind of almost annoying animals that have a modified suction disc, so they can suck onto the side of a shark, or they can suck onto the head of a manta, and because sharks and mantas, they don't have hands, they can't get them off. And so these guys are almost like hitchhikers. They suck onto these animals and they get a free ride wherever the shark or the manta is traveling in the ocean. So they save on energy, and then they can kind of feed whenever the sharks or the mantas feed. Unfortunately, they're a bit annoying, and you know, in terms of the hydrodynamic efficiency of the swimming of the manta, it's like creates a lot of drag, plus they can cause the mantas and sharks a lot of infections. But in case you're wondering what all those animals are, that's what they are. They're remoras. Mantas have incredibly good vision, so you can actually see the manta's eye on the side of its face here. Sorry, that's a close-up of a remora, so you can see almost how ugly they are. But also, I just want to show you, like I said, this is what the mantas look like from the front. So you can see its eye like looking at me right there, and you can also see those cephalic fins that I was talking about before, those projections off the front of their face pretty well in this shot as well. So you can see mantas have really good vision. You can see this one looking at me very closely, inspecting at me as it comes closer. Unlike some species of sharks and rays, mantas rely very, very heavily on their vision. They're very social animals and are very, you know, the perception and kind of spatial awareness is very good in these animals. They use their vision quite a bit. You can see other manta rays in the back. This is another kind of very specific sort of character of these animals, is that they're highly social. So oftentimes when you find mantas swimming around in the ocean, they're in larger groups because they tend to associate with those groups. And so they have either friends or families that they seem to travel with, and we're trying to learn more about this particular social behavior now at the moment. As I said, I would show you the eye a little bit closer. This is like a really close up on the eye, and you can actually see the eye is busy retracting almost into its head. So what happens is if you get too close to the manta, like I'm doing here, but I'm specifically doing it to actually show you this, if you get too close to the manta will actually start to retract its eye back into its head. And that's because unlike a lot of species of sharks and rays, mantas don't have eyelids, or they don't have nictitating membranes, which is what a lot of sharks have, so they can almost close their, like an eyelid over their eye to protect it, like you or I. Mantas don't have that. So in order to protect their eyes, because vision is so important, they actually use their muscles to pull their eyeball back into the socket and then protect themselves. So that I just wanted to show you a little bit of detail on, because it's pretty neat. Other features about the mantas that make them so unique, well, this is a pretty big feature, which is their mouth. So as I said before, those paddle-like projections on the front of their face, you can see in this picture they've unraveled them, and it's holding them like little hands almost in front of their mouth. And as I said before, that's to help direct water into their mouth so that they can feed on food more efficiently. And then you can see this massive mouth of theirs. Manta rays have evolved this huge cavernous mouth. You know, you could actually probably fit yourself inside of a manta ray's mouth if you wanted to, because it's so big. But honestly, they would never accidentally even swallow you, because they're very careful about what they eat. Manta rays only eat the smallest animals in the ocean, so they're planktivorous, just like whales, just like whale sharks or basking sharks. They feed on the smallest animals in the ocean, and not just any types of things. They feed specifically on certain types of zooplankton. So they really like tiny little shrimps. They love like fish eggs. They love little gelatinous animals, and that's what they target. So even though they have these massive mouths, there's never any fear that you're on the dinner menu for a manta ray. You can actually see all that food gathering at the surface here. This is a great shot of a manta feeding, actively feeding, and you can actually see all of that zooplankton pouring into the manta's mouth. As you can imagine, because they're some of the largest animals in the ocean, mantas need to eat quite a bit of this tiny little prey in order to survive, in order to be able to sustain themselves. It's kind of almost hard for people to imagine how much they need to eat, but I can say that they, in captivity, they eat about 12 to 15% of their body weight a week in those tiny little organisms. So you can imagine they're eating billions and trillions of these tiny little animals per week. Now, manta rays are very, very efficient feeders. You know, they're masters at gulping huge amounts of water in order to capture all of this food. I'm not sure if any of you guys can guess, but they actually can filter about 240 gallons of water a minute. And that's about as much water as you might find in like a typical hot tub. So, you know, a hot tub's full worth of water is kind of being filtered through a manta ray's mouth every single minute in order for them to feed efficiently. That's pretty incredible. This is kind of what the zooplankton looks like close up. You can actually see all of the little jellies and all of the other little microscopic critters that are in the water. This is the food source for mantas, as well as things like whale sharks. So our largest animals in the ocean rely on this type of food, from the great whales to things like the largest fish in the ocean being the whale shark. As I said before, zooplankton can be anything, really, any type of little animal, from a fish egg to larval fish to little jellies. Pretty much anything that can't swim against the current, and that, you know, kind of gathers at the surface of the ocean, particularly. You know, these guys love to target. So this is a manta ray feeding, but it's a view from the bottom, and why I'm showing you the view from the bottom is just so that you can see where the water exits. So it enters in huge quantities from the front, and then after the manta ray captures the food with like little sieves almost in their mouth, then the clean water then passes throughout the back, and these are called the gill slits. Now, if you look straight through a manta's mouth, you actually see the structures that I'm talking about where they're actually capturing the food. They're called branchial filter, so it's actually like a little filtering plate on the inside of the manta's mouth. So all of the water hits those filtering plates, captures all the tiny little particles, and then the clean water passes through. And then the manta ray is able to just eat the little organisms that are attached to those filters. This is kind of what the food looks like once it's been accumulated in their stomach. So this might have been a manta ray feeding for a couple of hours, and then I kind of scooped out the contents of its stomach. Unfortunately, this manta ray was killed in a fishery, and you know, as I was doing an autopsy on it, I managed to grab a little bit of stomach contents so you guys could see what all that zooplankton looks like. It's actually very thick and nutrient-rich food. Manta rays feed in different ways. So sometimes they feed by just opening their mouth and swimming. Sometimes when all the particles are sort of densely packed together, like you get little balls of plankton, and then they make these huge barrel rolls through the water, these giant barrel rolls back on themselves. They almost look like they're dancing through the water trying to collect all of this food. And we call that barrel roll feeding. And then sometimes when there's a lot of little plankton towards the bottom, they'll use their mouths like giant vacuum cleaners, and they'll just suck up all of the plankton straight from the bottom. So there's a lot of different ways that they feed. They're actually very, very intelligent animals. This is one of the things that I love so much about studying them, is that, you know, they are quite clever. And one of the ways to be able to see how clever they are is when they actually start to cooperatively feed. So instead of just feeding alone, manta rays sometimes feed as teams. So sometimes you can get two manta rays feeding in tandem together. So they'll be stacked on one another, and they do that strategically to try and capture food more efficiently. And sometimes it's not just two. Sometimes you'll get hundreds of mantas feeding together. And they do things like cyclone feeding, which is almost like they use their giant bodies as a tornado. So they all swim in a circle, and then they push all of that plankton into the center of that tornado, and then they smash through the center of it, grabbing all of the food. So they can feed sometimes in huge, huge groups, and it's really, really exciting to see them feed like this. You can actually see how strategic it is and how clever they are. That's, you know, really one of the reasons why I love to work on mantas so much, is because they're so smart. You know, I've worked with a lot of sharks and a lot of rays in the ocean, but nothing really behaves like a manta ray. And you know, it was no surprise to us really when we found out that manta rays have the largest brain of any marine fish. So that's relative to body size and also just net weight. So they have these massive brains inside of their heads, and you know, that kind of almost it almost really indicates to us, you know, how social and how clever they probably are. I think part of this intelligence is their curiosity, is their tolerance for lots of animals, particularly us as humans. Manta rays are one of those animals that when you're in the water with them, they want to interact with you. So you're not just seeing them swim away. A lot of animals you see underwater, if they see you, they get frightened and they swim away from you. Manta rays swim towards you. They really are curious. They like to interact with humans. They can also appreciate that we're intelligent animals, and can sometimes, you know, spend hours with us underwater just playing and interacting. I've never swam with an animal quite like a manta ray before, and they definitely act more like marine mammals like whales and dolphins than they do like normal fish, and especially normal sharks. I just want to show you guys exactly what I mean. I know it's hard when I testify to these things to give you a great indication of what I'm talking about. So this is a short little video here. This is one of my research team. I'm actually taking the video myself, and you can see this enormous female here in Ecuador coming down to investigate one of my divers. You can see how gentle she is and how friendly, but you can also see how trusting she is, how she wants to interact with this diver. She wants to figure out who he is and what he's doing. But hopefully it'll show you also that just because they're enormous doesn't mean that they're not incredibly gentle. They're very, very gentle animals as well. So part of my work is to learn more about the social nature of these animals. I spent a lot of time learning about the social behavior of manta rays, and it's a really exciting field because they are so intelligent. I can't wait, you know, every time to get in the water and be able to interact and play with them. It's a real privilege to be able to work with another animal that is highly intelligent and that does like to interact with you. So there's going to be a lot of work done, I think, on the social behavior of this animal over the next sort of 10 years. It's kind of hard to find mantas, though, so it's not an easy job that I have. I've been working on them for the last 15 years all over the world, and sometimes it's hard to track them down. The easiest place for me to find them is what we call a cleaning station. So part of the natural daily habit of a manta ray is to come in from the deep water every morning to shallow reef areas to be cleaned by small cleaner fish. And you're probably wondering what that's all about. Well, if you haven't learned about cleaning stations before, cleaning stations are kind of like little car washes. So animals are swimming around like the highway of the ocean, and every once in a while they duck into and make a pit stop for what we would call a cleaning station, where little host cleaner fish will come up and remove everything from algal buildup to parasites, to if they have a shark bite, they might clean it. So it's kind of like a little hospital, a mini hospital, where the animals can get attended to by these little cleaner fish. The animals never eat the cleaner fish because they have what's called a symbiotic relationship. And so, like here you see a manta ray swimming in, it opens its mouth, it flares its wings and its gills, and you can see all of the little cleaner fish attending to it and cleaning it up. This is the best place for me to find mantas and interact with them and do my research on them, because when they're not at these cleaning stations, they're basically swimming around out in the blue. As I said before, manta rays are constantly swimming their whole life. They never stop swimming, they never rest at the bottom, they never sleep. They're constantly moving. And one of the ways that I've had to learn about them, is to actually put tags on them, because they're so highly mobile that I can't keep track of them wherever they go. So we've used advanced technology called satellite tags or acoustic tags to be able to track their movements when they leave these cleaning stations and roam around the oceans. Now, obviously, this isn't true to size. We don't put tags on that are quite this big, but you can see what the tag looks like. So when we deploy it on the manta rays, it captures all kinds of information, everything from the GPS location of where that animal is, to the temperature of the water, to the depth that animal is in at the moment. So it's like a mini little laboratory, and it gives us all this information back about what the animal is doing so that I can interpret how these animals live their lives. We've learned a lot about these animals. I think certainly the standouts are things like they're highly migratory. They move long distances in the ocean, so you can imagine them like animals like elephants, that move over the vast savannas of Africa from one location to another. That's what manta rays are like. They move throughout the oceans long distances, thousands of miles at a time, looking for food and looking for mates and going from one habitat to the next. They also are really deep divers, so they're amongst some of the deepest diving fish in the world. So they can dive, well over sort of a mile from the surface, and so they're very, very athletic animals. They're not to be underestimated. Just because they're beautiful and just because they're gentle, they shouldn't be underestimated. These are incredibly athletic and amazing animals. So we don't really know what they're doing in some of these areas. We have no idea what they're doing in the depths of the ocean. We suspect they may be feeding down there, but there's definitely a lot left to learn about mantas. And a lot of people say to me, like, it's amazing the work that you do, and it must be so exciting, but you probably have learned everything about mantas, so maybe I can't get into this field. I actually think the opposite. I think the more we learn about mantas and the more we learn about some of our animals in the ocean, the more there is still to learn. We're discovering new things every day that lead us to new questions that we need new discoveries to be made about. So there's always room for people to learn more about these animals, and I think that's, studying marine megafauna is not just a rewarding career, but it's also a really exciting one, because you're constantly making these interesting discoveries. I'm personally a conservation biologist, and a lot of my team are conservation biologists, so our goal is not just to study these animals and learn more about them, like their biology and things, but it's to figure out how to protect them. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what's the problem? Why are mantas threatened, or why are they in trouble? Not a lot of people realize how delicate the ocean really is, and the impacts that we as humans are having on the ocean is causing chaos all over the world. We're losing our reefs, we're losing our fish, we're losing our top predators, and the ocean is really suffering. It's not necessarily healthy anymore, and so many of these animals need our attention. Now, in terms of manta rays, I think one of the biggest problems, one of the reasons why they're in most trouble, is because they don't have very large populations. So unlike things like sharks, where there may be millions of sharks out there, population sizes of mantas are relatively small. So in some places, I'll use an example from the United States because you guys are from the U.S. In the Hawaiian Islands, they may only have sort of several hundred manta rays living in the archipelago, and that means that it's really hard for Hawaii to keep this population healthy because there's not really that many. So it's kind of hard to protect a population of animals when you actually have so few to start with. One of the other major problems is manta rays don't have very many offspring. So you can see actually quite a grainy photo, but a photo of a pregnant manta here. You can see just how big mantas get when they're pregnant. But even though they get to that size, you might be thinking there's 100 babies inside. There's actually only one. So manta rays only give birth to one offspring at a time, one baby at a time. So if populations start to dwindle, like if there's any pressure on a population, the animals can't rebound very quickly. They can't rebuild their numbers because they only have one baby at a time. And so this is one of the really big problems with manta rays that we face. And as I said before, our oceans are getting very complicated. There's many threats today to all of our ocean friends, and especially things like manta rays that feed at the surface and eat things like plankton that I was talking to you about. As you can imagine, one of the biggest threats to them might be things like pollution and plastics. And you can see this tiny little baby manta ray here trying desperately to feed at the surface and get bigger and grow stronger amongst all of this rubbish and plastic in Indonesia. So this is becoming more and more of a problem in the ocean as our animals lose their habitats, as they're unable to find food because there's so much pollution in our oceans. And then obviously we also have the added problem of overfishing. I'm sure you guys have heard that, we're fishing our oceans aggressively, sometimes directly targeting certain animals and sometimes not, but in the case of manta rays are being targeted and harvested in many parts of the world for their body parts to be used in certain tonics in Asia, and that's taken a huge toll on their populations as well. So unfortunately, manta rays are in quite a bit of trouble. So in addition to doing all of the science every day and having my teams out all over the world learning about these manta rays, we're also trying to educate the world about how beautiful and wonderful these animals are and how they need to be protected. How they need to be protected from our pollutions, how they shouldn't be being killed for any type of product. That they should just be being appreciated. And I spent a lot of time doing documentaries and doing educational work like I am with you guys today to try and educate people about how wonderful and gentle and amazing these animals are. I also need help from the public. So the faster we can learn about mantas, the more we'll learn and the faster we can protect them. So I actually created almost what's like a Facebook for manta rays. It's called Manta Matcher. It's the first global online database for mantas. And this is like a global repository of all of the photos of all of the mantas all over the world. So every single time somebody sees a manta ray, they can upload it to this database. It almost acts like the FBI fingerprint database because every single manta ray has an individual spot pattern on its belly. So no mantas look the same. Just like you or I, their little prints on their bellies, the little spots that you guys are seeing, every single one of them is different. So we've created a system, an algorithm, just like the FBI did, to be able to match these patterns. So we can put them all into a database and we can sort them. We can figure out how many there are in the world, where they're swimming, how long they live, where they last were seen, and then where they show up when they are seen again. So this kind of like Facebook is proving really, really valuable to researchers, and it's really uniting people around the world because people don't have to just sit by and wonder, what can I do? Now actively you can learn how to scuba dive. You can go out in the world and take photos of mantas and contribute them to this database. So it's really exciting. So this is the kind of what I do for a living. I think what's really amazing is that anyone can make a difference. You can, if you love the ocean or if you love, whatever it is that you love, if you love any type of specific animal, then you can focus your time and attention to learning more about this animal and trying to help them. I've spent the last 15 years of my life learning about these animals and trying to figure out how to protect them globally. And you can do the same if you're interested. If you love animals and you want to make a difference, then I suggest that every single one of you focus on one thing. You can't necessarily fix it all, but any one individual can have a massive impact if you focus on just one thing and try and make that thing better. So this is what I do with my life. I like to share it with people so that people can get inspired and have hope that they can make a difference as well. And I hope that you guys consider following our work a little bit more. You can track my work at thequeenofmantas.com or on Facebook, and you can track my foundation's work online as well. We're very active on Facebook and very active on social media, so you can actually follow all of our researchers while we're researching and doing what we do out there in the field. But hopefully you guys have some questions, and I'm able to answer some of those questions for you.
All right, Andrea, thank you so much for giving that amazing look into the life of a manta ray. Speaking for kids around where I live in the landlocked city of Guelph, that all of this would have been brand new to them. So thank you so much. That was amazing. What I'll do now is I'll introduce the classrooms very quickly, and I'll pass through and grab one question from each classroom. And then if classrooms can stick around, we'll go in reverse and do one more from them again, if they can stick around. So just joining us today, we have Mrs. Thiessen's class from Surrey, BC. They're a grade 3 class. Mr. Southward's class from Kapuskasing, Ontario, a grade 3-4. Mrs. Cowley's from Sarnia. They're a grade 7 class. Mrs. Cherry's from California. They're a grade 6 class. And Mrs. Gray's class from Pennsylvania, they were grade 6s, joined us for a little bit, but they had to duck out for their lunch. So why don't I start with Mrs. Thiessen's class in BC, if you guys have a question for Andrea.
Hi, we sure do.
Yeah, why do manta rays keep on swimming for their entire life?
It's a really great question. I mean, I don't know that I have a specific answer, but that's just what they do. So, like I said, some types of rays, like they are physically capable of sitting down on the ground for most of their day and kind of chilling out, and then when they want to feed, then they move around and try and capture a little animal to feed on. But manta rays literally can't stop swimming because then they can't breathe. So that's just how they're designed, and I'm not sure exactly why they're designed like that, but we know they have to keep swimming in order to stay alive.
All right, great question. So we'll swing back to your classroom. Let's visit Mr. Southward's classroom. I'll turn your mic on.
Stand up, buddy, stand up.
How do manta rays eat plankton and still get so big?
Did you hear
That's
that?
also a really great question. Yeah, I did, and that's a great question. You know, I had the same question myself. I think it's really strange that the largest animals in the ocean eat the
It's okay, it's just... Is it us? Oh, God. No, don't.
Okay, looks like Andrea may have frozen for a moment, but that does happen when you connect to somewhere as far away as Mozambique.
That's why I was trying to talk to you a little bit more about the fact that
And you're frozen.
We're still on microphone.
but they have to.
We're still on microphone. Anybody can hear us.
Sorry, boys and girls, we'll just give it a second and see if the connection clears up.
Get a selfie with her.
Get a selfie. Don't take a selfie. Yeah, do it.
No selfie, just take a picture. This is frozen.
Coming back.
It's a selfie.
Am I back?
Yes. No.
Yes?
I
Yes.
think so. Yes.
Andrea, can you hear me?
Why you guys can hear me? Yes.
We lost right at the beginning of your answer about being such big creatures eating such small things.
Guys.
Yeah, she heard the question, lady.
Am I back now?
You're kind of coming in and out. I think we may be running out with our internet connection luck today.
Just so you guys are aware, this is where she is right now. This is where we are.
All right. Well, the classrooms that are joining us, if we can't get Andrea back, what I might do is just have you can each send me, say, your top 3 questions, and I'll send them to Andrea, and we'll have her answer those questions and send them back to you guys. But she just blinked off, which I think she's trying to reset her computer. So let's give her 1 or 2 more minutes to see if she can pop back on. And if that doesn't work, we had an awesome lesson. We might have to do the questions the old-fashioned way with paper and pen, or computers in this case, and she'll send the questions in. So we'll give her another minute, and if she doesn't make it back in, we'll sign off for today. So again, thank you for being awesome. Thanks for your patience, and I hope you guys learned a ton about mantas. But it looks like
We're still live.
Andrea, can you hear me?
Right on.
Okay. Well, teachers, again, sorry for the connection, but it is from Mozambique, so I think we were lucky that we got the whole presentation in. If you do need to sign off and move on to other things, I know we're at about the 45-minute mark. Feel free to. Oh, wait. Andrea, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't know if I've lost you guys. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. It's not your fault. It's more the internet doing whatever the internet's up to at the moment. Well, let's try and continue the questions. You're back now. It was frozen, and then we lost you completely. So, Mr. Southward's class had just asked about mantas being so big and eating things so small, and then we lost you.
Yeah, and what I said is that it's very, very strange that the largest animals in the ocean eat the smallest animals, but that's actually why they have to eat so many. So, you know, instead of just eating one large item, manta rays may have to feed for hours and hours a day because they have to eat, you know, trillions of these tiny little animals. But that's just the strategy that some of these large animals employ. Everything from our great whales to our biggest fish in the ocean, like whale sharks and manta rays.
Okay. Great question. So, Mrs. Cherry's class in California, your mic's on.
Okay, sorry, we're going to have a student right there in front of him, so not that close to come back right there and ask him right.
Does the El Nino weather affect manta rays?
And actually, we didn't even know the answer to this question. Is yes. So this is one of the very first years that my team has been able to have a look at this. And all year we've been seeing very, very strange behavior and, you know, unnatural patterns. So when we were in Mexico now, for instance, there's supposed to be a season for manta rays in the Yucatan Peninsula, and we hardly saw any mantas at all. They didn't even show up to the big chow down that they normally do every year in Mexico. In Ecuador, we saw less manta rays than almost every other year that we've ever been there. So El Nino is having a huge impact, and I think that's something that we should all take seriously, because as the weather patterns are changing on the planet, we may see that the change in weather patterns disrupts all of the animals in the ocean, not just mantas, but all of them. But yes, it does look like that El Nino is having a huge impact on how manta rays live their lives this year.
All right, that was a great question. Mrs. Cowley's class,
Definitely.
I know you guys joined a little bit late, but do you have a question for Andrea about mantas?
Hi, my name's Ethan, and what's the biggest manta ray you ever saw?
Hey,
Recorded.
Ethan. Sorry?
What's the biggest manta ray that's ever been recorded?
Okay, the biggest manta ray ever to be recorded was actually about 8 meters, maybe about sort of 24, 25 feet. I have personally seen manta rays that are 7 meters, about 21 feet or so, and those are the largest ones that we know about in the ocean today. I don't know of any 8-meter mantas or 25-foot mantas swimming around in the ocean anymore. Lots of our biggest animals in the ocean have kind of shrunk because of hunting and over, different pressures. But there definitely are 7-meter mantas swimming around because I've swum with them myself.
Lucky. Very cool. Let's see. Andrea, do you have time to swing through each classroom one more time for a final question?
Definitely.
All right. Let's go to Mr. Southward's class. I can see some duotangs. I bet you they have a question or two over there.
What?
Why do manta rays jump out of water?
Why do they jump out of the water?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I didn't even talk about that. I was always curious about that, so I actually did a study a while back, and sometimes people suggested that they may jump out for fun or just to play, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They actually seem to jump out very specifically, and when they jump out, they're usually together in a large group. And they're usually either feeding cooperatively together, like I did talk about in the presentation, or they're trying to mate. They're trying to find a partner. And so what we think is the jumping and the splashing is all a form of communication. So sometimes when the visibility is low and they can't see very well, they revert to something like hearing. And as you can imagine, a giant manta ray jumping out and landing on its belly creates a huge splash. And so we think that the jumping and the splashing is probably some form of communication. Maybe the bigger, hunkier male mantas make bigger noises, and that way the females can find them, or maybe jumping out a certain way indicates that they found some type of food and it can direct the others to that patch of food. But it does specifically seem to be kind of maybe about communication. Great question.
Hey, Mrs. Cherry's class, your mic is active.
Do humans have a positive impact on manta rays?
Humans have a positive impact. Well, I think they can have a positive impact now by helping them to survive. So while we have made a lot of obstacles, while there's a lot of threats to them currently, while there's pollution and all kinds of other things, fisheries for mantas out there, we have the ability to change all of that. So that's one of the reasons that I do a lot of education, because I actually think people love manta rays. They can't harm anyone. They're beautiful. They're intelligent. They're one of the most iconic animals in the ocean, and we do have the ability to make sure that they don't go extinct. And I think that we can manage them properly and protect some of their key habitats. And we can encourage tourism so that people can spend time with them, but make sure that the tourism isn't harmful, so people aren't riding on the backs of mantas and kind of changing their behavior. So I do think that humans can make a really big positive difference to manta rays' futures if we want to.
All right, great question. And we'll see if we have a wrap-up question from Mrs. Cowley's class in Sarnia. Here comes someone.
Do mantas have any adaptations to survive?
Oh, I just missed the end. Do mantas have any other
Adaptations to survive.
Well, I mean, they have a lot of adaptations to survive. So one of the things that I didn't tell you guys about, I don't know if any of you guys wondered, but manta rays don't really have any fat like any of the big whales do. And I told you that they kind of dive really deep, but I didn't really tell you how cold it was down there. So it's really, really, really cold down there. at like a kilometer from the surface. You know, it can get, you know, down to about 4 degrees Celsius, which I don't even know what that is in Fahrenheit, but really cold. And if they don't have any fat, you know, how are the ways that they protect their organs and they protect their brain? Well, they actually have this network of blood vessels around their eyes and around their brain in order to warm it. So even though fish are traditionally cold-blooded species, manta rays have certain adaptations, as you pointed out, that can create a warming effect in their like most important organs that can keep them alive when they're at really, really severe depths and that are really, really cold. So that's one of their many adaptations. They also have enormous livers that are really full of oil that can help keep them buoyant in the water, so that they're, you know, almost neutrally buoyant. Mantas are actually a little negatively buoyant, but they're very, very buoyant animals because of these massive oily livers that they have. So that's another really cool adaptation that mantas have specifically. They're just full of really interesting adaptations because, you know, they lead these really adventurous lives, you know, swimming long distances, diving really deep, you know, jumping out of the air. So they are very, very well designed animals, and that again is one of the reasons that I love them so much. Great question.
All right, well, Andrea, thank you so much. But before we wrap up, I just want to share something else that I know the Marine Megafauna Foundation is working on right now. So it's actually up on the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants website as well. The campaign, the Creating Waves campaign. So I can share a little bit about it, or do you want to share a little bit about it just before we wrap up for today?
Sure. Yeah, we're very proud of this campaign. Our programs in Mozambique are not just about researching these animals, but they're about you know, trying to build a better future for Mozambique and connect the next generation to the ocean. You know, you guys are fortunate to have people like Joe and like your teachers who really want to bring information to you about the ocean and ocean stories and ocean researchers. But there's a lot of school groups and a lot of children out in the world that don't have these opportunities, and we're trying to create opportunities for kids in Mozambique so that they start to love the ocean and want to protect the ocean around them. So we've created a campaign called Creating Waves. And our education programs there involved actually teaching all of these kids along the coast in Mozambique how to swim. So many of these kids don't even know how to swim, so they're terrified of the ocean. So we're teaching them how to swim and giving them advanced training, and sometimes even teaching them how to free dive over time, and giving them a lot of great education about these animals, taking them out to see their first whale sharks or their first whales ever. And hopefully building this connection to the ocean so that, you know, you always protect what you love. And if we can get everyone around the world to love the ocean as much as I do, as much as our foundation does, then hopefully we can all try and make a positive difference and save our oceans. And that's what Creating Waves is all about.
Okay, awesome. So classes, if you do want to get involved and help out a little bit, one thing that's being done is schools are hosting Ocean Blue Days. So classrooms can, and whole schools can have days where they come maybe dressed for the beach or dressed in blue for the ocean, and then collect some donations that can then be passed along to the Marine Megafauna Foundation to help with this project, to help with the education and the conservation work that they are doing. So if any classrooms are interested in doing something like that over the next week or two, please send me an email or head to the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants website where you can get some more information. And be a great way to help out with conservation and about these beautiful creatures that Andrea just spent so much time teaching us about today and giving us such good information. Yeah, so again, Andrea, thank you so much. It was another great session. It's always fun when you come to hang out with us. And I can't thank you enough for giving us some time today. So I know it's evening there. So I'm going to turn the mics on for the class.
It is, but it was great to see all of you. Yeah, it was great to see all of your faces. It's a joy to be able to actually connect, especially because I am American, so it's nice to be able to connect with some American schools. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and you might follow along on our Facebook pages or social media, and hope you guys learned something, and maybe at Thanksgiving you can pass some of this information on to your family.
All right, awesome. I'm going to turn the microphones on so the classrooms can say thank you and goodbye, and then we'll sign off for today. All right, signing off.
All right, bye guys.